Welcome back to Dad's Foxbody Garage. It's been a minute since my last video, but wanted to throw something out here before the holiday and wish everyone Merry Christmas. And explain where I've been and what we're going to be doing for a little while anyways going forward with the channel. For you guys that are not new to the channel, you probably remember me talking about my shoulder getting tore up, moving out a bunch of stuff from my parents' cottage a couple years ago during the pandemic. While I just had it put back together and going to be doing light duty for a while. So just it's been a little over a week, and just kind of hitting that point now where you know, the mind fog is gone, and you know, my day-to-day can kind of resume as normal, but you know, just with one arm. So wanted to like I said, put a quick video out, and instead of doing anything on the car, we're gonna just bring up some things, talk about some things, try to get some conversations going back and forth in ways that maybe I can help you based on my mistakes that I've seen or done in the past working on cars. So I think we're going to start off this week by talking about issues I've seen or done with boosted cars. Now, I've been boosting cars since I was about 16 years old. My first car that I did that with was actually on my first car. Was a 1980 Pinto I bought when I was 15, and it's 2.3, 4-speed stick. It was a California car, but it didn't run when I bought it. It had a wiped out cam in the head. So what I ended up doing was I bought a turbo coupe head. It's brand new. I think I bought it through Ford, actually, because my dad worked at Ford. And we put that on, and I ended up putting a Holley 500 two-barrel on it and a header, and thing ran great for a little while until I beat on a little too hard and developed a rod knock. So that was the first engine I rebuilt. So during that rebuild process, I wanted to give it a little more power. So my dad and I came up with a turbo kit, kind of based on the Turbo Coupe Thunderbird, because the exhaust manifold was already available, and I already had the head, and I actually had like a next step up cam. It was a motorsport cam in it. So we ended up making a draw through style turbo kit on this thing, and you know, I've heard some complaints about them, how they say they have lag, they're not very responsive compared to a blow through, but they're pretty simple to build. You know, anybody that wants to get into a turbo without having to mess with like a blow through carb setup or anything like that, it wasn't too bad, especially for my first time. My dad was turbocharging stuff, you know, when I was a kid. You know, he had a friend that had a 2-liter Pinto they turbocharged, and he had another friend that had a Pantera that they turbocharged, because I guess the Pantera was running out of air over 100 and some miles an hour because the engine was in the back, you know, whatever. I think it's just an excuse to put a turbo on a Pantera. But anyway, he was pretty knowledgeable, just trial and error. Again, he wasn't a mechanic. He was just a gearhead, you know, like I grew up. So back to the Pinto. When I built it, or when we built it, I went backwards on carb size when I went to the turbo, because the pot that we managed to come up with in a junkyard, it was off of some kind of import car. The biggest one we could find to mount a carburetor to would only fit like a standard Pinto size carburetor. And the turbo we ended up buying was bigger than a stock turbo coupe. So knowing what I know now, it was probably the opposite of what we should have gone with. You know, we probably should have gone with more of a stock turbo and a bigger carb, because the small carb created a choke point. We couldn't get a lot of flow through it. Where if it was a blow through style, you know, it's not as much of a restrictor, because you're forcing it where you're trying to draw it through. So the articles I've read, you know, you want to stick to normal size or standard size. Like you could use a 650 on a 302 if you're a blow through, and it would be just fine. It's not as fussy. But if you have a draw through, you know, sky's the limit, because it's only going to draw as much as it can, but you just don't want to be too small, or it'll make a restriction. So the characteristics of how that car ran, it had a little bit of lag down low. First gear was pretty much useless. We couldn't build boost in it. But second gear, it would come alive, and when it would hit boost, well, this is once we adjusted the wastegate to like open at 12 pounds. It was standard. I think it was like 6, 7, 8, somewhere in there, but we put different springs in it. Got up to around 12 pounds, and that was about the limit of the factory head gasket. Because we tried to go more, and we ended up blowing the head gasket off. So anyhow, so when we'd hit 12 pounds, you know, the tires were on fire, and you know, you're trying to get through the gears as fast as you can, but those little 13-inch tires were just no match for the power we were putting out. But it wasn't very streetable friendly. I mean, you could fart around town a little bit, but it was either on fire or not, you know, basically. So what I take away from that is, you know, carb size really matters on turbocharged applications, and so does turbo size. You know, you can't just throw anything on there. Next thing I want to talk about was my blower application here. I did have a blower application very similar to this when I was in high school. It was the 144 version B&M, and this is the 174 Wyand. The one I had in high school, I actually bought off of a friend of mine that went in the military. I bought his whole car. He had a Mustang 2 Cobra that had the B&M blower set up on it. Well, he ended up blowing the motor up in his Mustang 2 and went off to the military, so I bought the whole thing. But all I used was the blower, and then I built a 289 hypo with a forged lower end and put that blower on that. And that ran really well. I had some initial issues with valve springs, and eventually the blower, you know, wrecked itself because my friend had taken it apart and not Loctited it back together when it he put it back together, and the rotors smacked into each other and broke. But that's nor here nor there. But my point was that setup was done by somebody else, so I never knew the carburetor, what was done to the carburetor, but everything worked really well on it. So when I went to build this one, I went with Explorer block, GT40P heads, and a vacuum secondary 750. And I had issues right out of the gate, but it was mainly, my first problem was timing. The distributor I purchased had more timing, total timing, than a stock distributor. So when I set my timing, I believe it was at 8 degrees before top dead center initial, I was still getting 34 degrees all in total timing, and I ended up rattling, spark knocking, and blowing the head gaskets off of on my first shakedown run. So learned from that mistake. I disabled all the advance in the distributor and just fixed the timing at 25 degrees. So when I start it up, it's at 25 degrees, all in 25 degrees. That's the way it is. And while I also had it out, I ended up changing heads to AFR small valve 185s, and it's a completely different animal. Haven't had any trouble with it all year. But the one thing that has been kind of troublesome up until hopefully now was the carburetor. Because on this setup, you have a lot of vacuum. You're sitting on top of a pump, basically. So at idle, mid-range, high, you have a lot of vacuum underneath your carburetor. So the power valve never opens. So those of you that may have saw the episode a while back, I actually did a blower carburetor modification to that carburetor by adding a port from the intake manifold and then drilled a hole in the side of the carburetor so I could access, or I could get vacuum to the cavity where the power valve lives. And then the power valve started working. My buddy and I, we started dialing it in, and we got it pretty close. But the adjustability of a Holley carburetor is pretty limited compared to the modern carburetors out there, like your ATMs or your Proforms. They have adjustable air jets, four-corner idle adjustment, mixture adjustment. I mean, I'll spin this around here and show you. But this is what I came up with. This is my port that I added, and then I added a second metering block here so I could have more adjustability. And with doing all that, I mean, it was fun and I learned a lot, but it just doesn't have the tunability as the new carbs. And I ended up going with an ATM. I called them up, and I told them what I had, and they built it right to my spec. So I'm really anxious to get that on the road next year and try it out. I haven't tried it out on the road, but it was super easy to set up for idle and everything, and it seems like it's going to be the way to go. It doesn't have the choke horn or any of that, so that'll be nice. So I won't have that restrict me. So again, lots of things I've learned over the years, and I'd love to talk to anybody with their boosted applications on any troubles they're having. I just saw a really good video on YouTube by Steve Morris. He had a supercharger application with a carburetor, and he went through a lot of adjustments that you can do on carburetors as far as getting the idle mixture right and air bleeds and all that, and adjusting, trying to get rid of that that hesitation that Holleys are kind of known for having. But a really good video, and I suggest if anyone has a carburetor blown application to go ahead and watch that. You'll learn something. I think I did. But anyhow, again, just I wanted to say Merry Christmas to everybody. Thanks for watching. If you guys haven't subscribed yet, please subscribe. And check out my website if you'd like any merch, or to know a little bit more about the channel. I'll put the address up here. Merch is available online there. Really easy to order. We do have it in stock. The only thing we don't have in stock yet are hats. But I did place a pilot order for hats. I don't have them pictured yet because I don't want to get a bunch of orders and no product. But that is coming very soon. I'm going to have cuffed and uncuffed beanies and the baseball caps with the Dad's Foxbody Garage on it. So everything that I make on the merch goes towards the builds, and I really appreciate your support. And again, Merry Christmas everybody, and hope to see you next year.